What are you doing?
So for the past few weeks, YouTube has been blowing up about the trailer for the Paramount remake of Heathers, or as some people are calling it, Pethers. Now, you can generally expect the fan reaction of any well-loved classic, especially one tinted with a lot of nostalgia, to initially be negative and reactionary regardless of the actual quality of that adaptation.
You can't possibly recapture what made the original so great. This is new, and new things are bad.
So as a fan of both the original Heathers film and the musical, when I saw that the initial reaction to the release of this trailer was very, very negative, I first took that with a grain of salt. I watched the trailer with an open mind and a genuine desire to enjoy it. Unfortunately...
Oh my clit.
Yeah, it's already looking pretty rough for a number of reasons. But trailers can be misleading. I mean, hell, the Phantom Menace trailer was pretty awesome, and the trailer for Bridge to Terabithia marketed an emotional, grounded story about a child's first experience with death as a fun, happy Harry Potter ripoff. Maybe the Heathers reboot was actually a smart, well-written remake that managed to keep what made the original so great while updating it with pertinent social commentary on aspects of our contemporary world, like social media culture. Maybe it was a genuinely good show that just suffered from poor marketing. So I watched it. Let's just break down, point by point, everything that's wrong with this hot garbage fire of an adaptation. For all the show's faults, I thought the initial scene featuring Shannon Doherty as JD's mom was actually quite well done, and I was almost ready to change my mind about the show. Unfortunately, despite a couple instances of cool cinematography, the editing choices generally felt lazy and poorly thought out. For example, lunch just ended. Heather Duke is like, let's leave and get slushies. It cuts to them getting slushies, and it is now night and completely dark out. Or Heather Chandler, who in this adaptation apparently doesn't die, wakes up and checks her phone after her suicide, and we're treated to about 30 seconds of her announcing what's happening out loud while staring almost directly into the camera. I'll talk about this a bit more later on, but the framing of certain scenes felt completely nonsensical on multiple occasions. The show uses editing to try to get you to side with the main characters, even when they're clearly in the wrong. Similarly, many of the choices don't stand up to a second of critical thought. For example, there's this controversy about a racist shirt that Ram is wearing from Remington's sports team, which I think in this universe is the college he's applying to. When Heather Chandler threatens to post a picture of him in the shirt, the implied consequence is that everyone will hate him and he'll lose his scholarship, which makes no sense, seeing as Remington has no reason to revoke his college scholarship for wearing their shirt. Like, if that's their mascot, why would they be mad about him wearing a shirt of it? Or there's this subplot towards the end of the episode about who gets to deliver a eulogy. The two Heathers are fighting over it until Heather Duke threatens to out McNamara as straight, and then stands up dramatically to do the eulogy. Except Betty Finn, no relation to Betty Finn from the original, stands up first, so she gets to deliver it. What high school assembly just lets the first person who wants to stand up deliver a eulogy? Why would this not be something that they planned in advance? And like, okay, let's just say they didn't plan it in advance because this was all in a hurry and on short notice and they didn't have a lot of time. Why would they then ask for a eulogy from the audience and just let whatever random person stands up do it? Also, the eulogy was super cringy and bad, but it's pretty much a given at this point that everything in this god-awful TV show is, so whatever. There's a scene where JD is holding Heather Chandler's phone hostage, and he tells her he'll only give her the phone back if she devours a whole thing of corn nuts. And she kind of just glares at him and is like, yeah, okay, fine. I mean, first of all, this completely contradicts the ruthless, cutthroat characterization that I think they're going for, which I'll talk a bit more in a second. Also, she's like a foot away from him. She could literally just reach out and grab the phone from his hand if she wanted to. It's not like they're super far away from each other or he's holding the phone particularly out of reach. Why would this popular, powerful individual's first reaction legitimately be to just do what this random edgelord tells her to do? Was this written by an alien whose only frame of reference for what a real human being acts like is like 2 CW shows? Who thought this was a good idea? I don't think this adaptation got a single character right. The obvious first victims of this problem are the Heathers themselves. In both the original film and the musical, the Heathers had big, distinct, immediately recognizable personalities. Take Heather Chandler. She was, in the words of Heather's the Musical, a mythic bitch. She's a rich, manipulative, privileged person who uses her power as a weapon to hurt people who are already looked down on by society. Think of the way she treats Martha in the original source material. It's cruel and unjustified, and is part of the commentary of the original. The Heathers are the most popular girls at this school that rewards wealth and privilege, to the extent that even the suicides of these people become sanitized and trendy. Contrast that with whatever this is.
We're not doing irony anymore. Keep up.
Yeah, keep up.
Shut up, Heather.
Yeah, shut up, Heather.
Heather, only I tell Heather to shut up.
For one thing, making her, and by extension the rest of the Heathers, these minorities, who are already not treated the best by larger society, immediately erases part of the point of these characters in the original. The original Heathers were mean to people because they were different and didn't fit in, not because they were hurting anyone. And yet, in the very first scene establishing Heather Chandler as this alpha bitch, this message is already kind of confused. She confronts Ram, who is wearing the aforementioned racist shirt. Heather makes him stand up and takes a picture of the shirt and then insists that he take it off. All the while, Ram is glancing around nervously, looking visibly afraid. Veronica speaks up to defend him, I guess, but is quickly shut down. This is a very strange scene. You have these high-angle shots of an awkward, nervous, bullied Ram, and low-angle shots of a domineering, unjustly cruel Heather Chandler. This tense music plays as Veronica, our viewpoint character, serves as the only objector to Heather's actions. You're clearly meant to sympathize with Ram in this situation, except Heather's kinda right? I mean, she's an obvious strawman, using expressions that no real-life social justice warrior would ever use, like calling his t-shirt literal Auschwitz. But the core message, that this dude's t-shirt was depicting a racist caricature using a super racist term with a really nasty history, was completely correct, and yet the way the scene is framed would have the audience on board with the idea that Ram didn't do anything wrong and Heather is unfairly targeting him. Now, to be fair, Heather then goes on to blackmail him into asking a girl for anal sex. This is obviously not a real thing a real human being at a real high school would ever do, but it is super fucked up and what does in the end establish Heather as a bad person. But contrast Heather Chandler's behavior in the original to Heather's in the remake. Mercilessly bullying people for being different versus for being racist is a huge change, and because this new Heather is such an outrageous caricature of a real person, it's a change without any real purpose. Let's take the most charitable interpretation of the remake's message, and assume it's supposed to be a well-meaning criticism of leftist call-out culture. There is something to be said for the idea that this culture often deviates so far from the original goal of helping people that it can devolve into an excuse to viciously bully anyone who has made even the slightest mistake without having to deal with those icky feelings of guilt for bullying an innocent person. Or maybe the message is supposed to be about how all power corrupts no matter who you are. But even if these messages are valid things to say, they're completely antithetical to the themes and characterization of the original Heathers. Heather in this adaptation feels more like a producer using a straw man to soapbox his own views than a fully realized character made out of love for the original. Any exploration of these themes, even if valid, would be better suited to a piece of media that is its own thing without trying to cash in on Heather's brand recognition. Most importantly, though, in both the original and the musical, you get the sense that the Heathers, bad people as they may be, are still teenagers following a script and doing what they have to do to survive the hellscape that is 80s movies high school. For instance, after Heather Chandler dies, it's easy to see Heather Duke's attack on anyone who questions her as a defense mechanism so she can stay in control, something that she's clearly very afraid of losing. They're not good people, but they're still people and they're still vulnerable. Never do the Heathers in this bizarre adaptation feel like real human beings. Rather, it feels like someone put a bunch of sassy Twitter memes and cultural references that 50-year-old execs think millennials like into a predictive text algorithm, and the characters are using whatever the algorithm gave them as the script. And even if they are going to make everyone constantly spit out these sassy one-liners, there's still no sense of vulnerability or believability about them. They don't dress like real teenagers dress, they don't talk like real teenagers talk, and there is overall just nothing human about them. Veronica is an interesting character. She's smart, she's cynical, she's wisecracking, and she's not a purely good person, seeing as she's done some asshole things in order to fit in with the popular crowd, not to mention doing a few murders. But she's also someone who genuinely wants to do the right thing and ultimately ends up trusting her moral compass. But remake Veronica is confusing. She's completely and utterly unlikable, and yet I'm not entirely certain whether or not the showrunners were trying to present her as a sympathetic character. It seems like they're framing her as the audience's viewpoint character, the person who we're immediately supposed to identify with and empathize with. The very first scene she's in is an interview with her school counselor. We're treated to this image of a person who's a little bit awkward and is still finding herself and is unsure of who she is. It's a super relatable situation, and even the camera work lingers on her facial expression while she looks pensive and sad. High-angle shots to make her look small next to the Heathers is designed carefully to make us identify with and root for Veronica. But all of her actions in the pilot seem to directly contradict what the show is trying to tell you about her. She sucks! She's like Alyssa from End of the Fucking World if they sucked out every ounce of likability. She fantasizes about murdering Heather Chandler because Chandler calls her an Ugg boot latte. I think that's what an alien would come up with as an insult if its only exposure to human culture was a Mad Libs book written by the sentient form of 2008. Later, Heather Chandler ends up posting the picture of Ram wearing the racist shirt. Veronica, presumably more mad that a guy wearing a racist t-shirt that he chose to put on in the morning was posted on the internet than she was about the actual racism in the first place, gets into a fight with Heather that ends with Veronica calling her a fatty. This is especially weird because it's clearly a foil to the lick it up scene in the original Heathers, which is this big subversive moment where our protagonist finally stands up against the mean girl's tyranny. This Heathers adaptation's big equivalent to that is a skinny blonde girl calling a fat girl a fatty. So brave, so subversive. Anyway, Heather delivers this cringy monologue about how everyone's gonna remember Veronica fat-shaming her and hate her forever. Veronica goes home and feels bad, not because she said a bad thing, but because she's afraid that there will be consequences for the thing that she said. And then she declares that she wishes Heather would die. Like, don't get me wrong, Heather's a huge asshole in this, but Veronica's barely better. She's every whiny, self-righteous teenager who's convinced she's better than all of her classmates, and yet the show is dedicated to framing her as the likable voice of reason in all this. It's bizarre. She's just as unlikable as Heather Chandler is in terms of personality. Put a layer of utter blandness and poor line delivery on top of that, and the only character I'm really rooting for in all of this is Cthulhu. He wasn't in the original, but as long as we're changing everything about it anyway, we might as well add an eldritch monstrosity into it, so at least some of these characters might end up dead in the bottom of the sea at the end of this. JD in the original is a fantastic character. Admittedly, he's a little different in the original film versus in the musical. The musical goes to further lengths to present him as a damaged, broken person, but is still clear to make sure that none of his trauma excuses his violent, manipulative personality, it just explains it. In both cases, however, he is a charming, charismatic, snarky character. He quotes classical literature, he hates the popular kids, and as terrible of a human being as he is, it's easy to understand why Veronica gets swept up into his charm. This guy, on the other hand, is a massive cringe-lord with no redeeming characteristics. He keeps calling Veronica my dear, but the actor doesn't have an ounce of charisma, so it just ends up sounding incredibly awkward rather than suave or charming. You can see how the original JD manipulated Veronica into doing all this stuff. This JD couldn't convince me to wash the dishes, let alone do a murder.
Blah, blah, blah. Look, despite the box we check on our college applications, my dear, we still all end up worm food in that great corn nut landfill in the sky.
Like, what is that line delivery? It's like they wrote him to appeal to teenage girls who watched Riverdale and thought, like, I would watch the shit out of this show if they extended Cole Sprouse's weirdo monologue to 45 minutes long and superimposed it on top of Tate and Violet scenes from American Horror Story, but, like, acted by the illegal Heathers kids in 25-year-olds' bodies. Although, now that I mention Tate, if they're not even gonna make these actors look remotely like high schoolers, they might as well go all the way and cast obvious adults who can, actually act. My point is, just get Evan Peters to play JD, you cowards. I mean, it still wouldn't be a good adaptation, but at least it would have redeeming qualities. Who's supposed to like this? They've driven away fans of the original Heathers, given how they've butchered every single character in the theme of the original. They've done very little to bring in new fans, judging by their limited marketing and the, response so far. My guess is that they were trying to either appeal to social conservatives, for whom the impending danger of a world run by social justice warriors who bully the skinny straight white kids might resonate, or they were trying to appeal to the social justice warriors who might be drawn in by the high proportion of LGBT characters, fat characters, and racial minorities. But from my extensive research on internet message boards, it seems like neither of these groups actually like the adaptation, and both are convinced that it was created to pander to the other. Internet conservatives, from what I've seen, tend to view the recasting of these roles as pandering to
the social justice warriors,
whereas social justice-oriented people seem to be criticizing the recasting of these roles as minorities in conjunction with their immediate demonization and the implication that calling out things like racism and homophobia is somehow akin to bullying. In short, they don't think a reboot wherein two skinny white kids who are the good guys murder a bunch of minorities who are the bad guys is inherently particularly progressive, and I'm inclined to agree. It's set in this world where the good, innocent, skinny, white, straight blondes are all at the bottom of the social ladder, and it's like these evil, mean, fat, genderqueer, Latina lesbians who are at the top. It's hard to tell sometimes whether this show is a parody of what conservatives think millennials are like, or if the creator genuinely thinks this is how real people act and think. It's so over the top that even though I'm pretty sure the creator is serious, it's genuinely hard to tell because, again, none of the people in this show act like real people. The result is this confused message which isn't entirely sure what it's trying to say or who it's trying to say it to. Paramount Heathers is bad. It's a bad adaptation of the original Heathers. It butchers the well-loved characters from the original and replaces them with cringy cardboard cutouts of what 50-year-old TV execs think millennials are like. It completely changes and at times even contradicts what the original Heathers was trying to say. But more than that, it's a bad TV show on its own. It's poorly written, poorly acted, poorly edited, and makes no logical sense. If you're interested in a smart, modern adaptation of Heathers that focuses on how contemporary social media hype and modern call-out culture affect the world that we live in, you're not gonna get it here. But on the plus side, at least it reminded me of how good the original Heathers was. I think I'm gonna watch Netflix and cry for a bit now.